Hello and welcome back to Video Games. I'm Tim Rogers. You are watching the Action Button review of Cyberpunk 2077. Let's talk about what I liked. As preparation for writing this segment of my review of Cyberpunk 2077, I first read every overtly negative review of the game I could find. I figured this would fuel my personal ambition for positivity. I try hard around here to be positive at any cost, a difficult task given my recent acquaintance with new-to-me medical vernacular. Mostly, this exercise in thoughtful perusal of negativity made me uncomfortable because I agreed with most of what most of those reviewers said. One of my favorite reviews of Cyberpunk 2077 ran on NPR.org. In this review, the writer, one Jason Sheehan, circled back many times to an in-game clothing item with a lackadaisical anti-corporate slogan scrawled on it. He used this jacket as a perfect encapsulation for most of what he found wrong with the game. I point this out right now because I promise you that when I first encountered this review of Cyberpunk 2077, I had already outlined a device for much later in this review. I'm going to do something similar, though far less elegantly than he did. And I'm going to do it far less elegantly on purpose. Whether purposefulness excuses ham-fistedness, I'll leave for you, the viewer, to decide. I don't disagree with a lot of his criticisms. He says Cyberpunk 2077 seems to believe that presentation is enough. He says Cyberpunk 2077 tries so hard to be cool, to come off as crass and edgy, to talk tough and play like some kind of anti-capitalist anarchy generator, and that if a work leans too hard into that act, it will always come off more like a desperate pose than anything honest. He comically describes every mission in Cyberpunk 2077 as boiling down to the same four choices. A. Shoot everyone. B. Have sex with a robot. C. Buy things. Or D. Quit. He calls Cyberpunk 2077 all surface, no depth. All signal, no content. And finally, he issues a recommendation. You want to stick it to the megacorps and hit them where it really hurts? Just turn the game off and walk away. A passage in this review in which the writer Jason Sheehan discussed playing the Cyberpunk tabletop RPG in the 1990s whilst entertaining teenage dreams of future techno-dystopias struck a power chord with me. I looked into Mr. Jason Sheehan's career. He's been a music critic for a long time. From the factoid that he played tabletop RPGs in the 1990s and now writes for NPR, I am able to expertly deduce that this man, right here, has probably been in a hardcore band. Please, Mr. Jason Sheehan, if you are watching this and you were not in a hardcore band at any point in your life, do not tell me. I could not take another shattered illusion this month. Do you want to know what a guy who is in a hardcore band looks like? You're looking at him right here, dude. I was in a hardcore band times like 9. Do you want to know what guys who are in hardcore bands do these days? They do stuff like this, like what I am doing right now. As someone who once painstakingly ingratiated himself over a period of a decade into Japan's remarkably dense cottage industry of evil nonsense music, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the worst conversation you can ever hear happening between two individuals regards the nature of what is and what is not, quote-unquote, punk. The most violent fistfight I ever witnessed in my life involved two Japanese girls arguing about some musician they knew who had recorded a guitar track for a TV commercial. Now, I don't want to expound upon my personal definition of punk yet. That would take me many minutes. And as you know by now, I prefer to stay on topic. So we'll sidebar my personal feelings about punk as a lifestyle and as an aesthetic for a segment much later in this review. All I wish to point out at this particular juncture is that when Jason Sheehan, writing for NPR.org, says that as far as Cyberpunk 2077 is concerned, quitting is the most punk option of them all, I presume he does not do so lightly. This is the sort of declaration a decades ago hardcore musician usually makes from a perspective of corporate authority. The layman trusts his definition of punk, and this definition guides the layman toward an entertainment purchase. For now, I will say that I find much merit in Mr. Sheehan's cathartic lowering of the not punk stamp onto Cyberpunk 2077's box art. However, I looked up NPR on Twitter.com. Like me, they have a 3-character handle. Unlike me, however, they have 8.7 million Twitter followers. I have, as of this writing, exactly 53,093. That makes me 163rd as influential as NPR. By Mr. Sheehan's own review of Cyberpunk 2077's definition, NPR is, in comparison to me, corpo scum. And thus, in this scenario, I am, by the letter of the laws I do not make, the punk. Therefore, the most anti-establishment thing I can do in this case is to like Cyberpunk 2077. So not only must I not quit the game, I must like it, simply to spite the much larger publication. I will therefore now commence an earnest attempt to assess CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 optimistically. I like the story. The majority of the negative reviews I perused of Cyberpunk 2077 stopped to bash the story in their later thirds. Pop culture critics tended to call the story some variety of a mess, whereas game enthusiast critiquers ricocheted off the plot's very shadow, often insinuating through cloudy phraseology that the plot did not in fact even exist. Now, I'm not a game critic. I'm just a guy. I've seen a lot of films and I've read a lot of books. I've even written some fiction novels, which I refuse to publish. I've played in more bands than you'll ever hopefully understand, and I have professionally reviewed music, though that's hardly relevant right this moment. I've made some video games, yes, though none of them has had anything resembling a narrative script longer than a few sentences. I don't precisely know where I stand in the grand scheme of the world, though I don't think it too presumptuous for me to say I think in terms of people who on occasion review media, I stand somewhere between film, book, music, and game critics. Furthermore, I think I know significantly more than a little bit about how a good story is structured. And I've got to say, Cyberpunk 2077's story is pretty good. It's pretty good as a story, and it's even more pretty good as a video game story. People are talking about it like it's Batman v Superman, though it's at least as good as Southland Tales. To best and more mathematically explain my definition of Cyberpunk 2077's narrative goodness, we'll need to, for the moment, extricate its plot from its genre. Don't worry, we'll talk about the genre later. And by the way, I'm about to spoil just about every relevant large plot detail from this entire game. So, in Cyberpunk 2077, you play as a mercenary named V. The player can choose one of 3 life paths that lead V to wind up meeting, at first antagonizing, and then quickly befriending an idealistic fellow mercenary named Jackie Wells. Jackie dreams of becoming a legend. A montage fast-forwards through the first 6 months of Jackie and V's working friendship. Then we control V as V and Jackie complete one of their usual jobs. Afterward, we hear Jackie speak of the current state of his legend aspiration. Any minute now, Jackie says, something big is going to turn up. Something big starts turning up the very next day. Dexter Deshawn, a bit of a legend himself, asks V and Jackie to pull off a richly complicated heist. The heist requires preparation. They need to acquire a tool from some dangerous fellows. V and Jackie can steal the tool, buy it fairly, or do a little bit of both. All that matters is that they get it. Next, they have to confer with a businesswoman with special knowledge of the heist venue. They pore over recordings in search of clues of the heist object's exact whereabouts within a highly guarded penthouse. It turns out they're to steal a mysterious artifact from the problem child son of the world's exorbitantly wealthiest man. After they've obtained the tool and the necessary information, they undercover infiltrate a luxurious hotel, make their way to the penthouse, and steal the item. Of course, as heists in fiction often do, it all goes bad. Holed up in a closet, V and Jackie witness the rich boy murdering his rich daddy. Security intervenes. V and Jackie jump from the penthouse's roof, crash through some glass, and get hurt real bad. The mysterious artifact's case is damaged, meaning Jackie must physiologically bond with it in order to keep it from disintegrating. Jackie and V fight their way out of the hotel and into the getaway vehicle, in which Jackie sadly dies, passing the mystery artifact on to V, who philosophophysiologically bonds with it to preserve its existence. V meets Dexter at the designated rendezvous point. The chaos caused at the heist venue upsets Dexter, who then makes a phone call in which he very clearly is buying plane tickets out of town. Dexter then shoots V in the head. V dies. However, the mysterious artifact takes effect as of the instant of V's brain's destruction. We now glimpse the past, in which the rock and roll band fronting terrorist Johnny Silverhand, played by Johnny Mnemonic, Johnny Utah, Johnny John Constantine, John Jack Traven, Jonathan Johnny Harker, and John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves, rocks a house, says goodbye to his best friend and bandmate, and flies in a helicopter to a corporate skyscraper he blows up with a nuclear bomb, shortly before getting arrested, tortured, and killed by the world's exorbitantly wealthiest man. Except, it turns out he wasn't completely killed. The torture device in fact stole his soul and preserved it in the form of a handy portable artifact. So when V awakens to see the slain trillionaire's bad butt samurai bodyguard skull-shooting Dexter dead in the dump yard, V's no longer riding brain solo. V's doctor, Victor, tells V that being shackled to another soul represents a mortal threat, and so the driving motivation for the rest of the story arrives. If V does not get Keanu Reeves out of their head, V will die. A difficult, if not impossible task for any person in this real modern world, though let's remember, Cyberpunk 2077 is an escapist fantasy. Act 2 of Cyberpunk 2077's three-act story kicks off with a forked path. V must listen to what Takemura, disgraced Ronin samurai bodyguard of the now-dead richest man alive, has to say about the stolen magical relic. V must ask Keanu Reeves' elite butt-kicking ex-almost girlfriend for help locating the scientist who created the relic in the first place. Each of these tasks digs V deeper into trouble. Keanu Reeves' ex-almost girlfriend introduces V to a 13-year-old's idea of a hot girl, Pan Am Palmer, a Borderlands cosplayer who probably likes all the Transformers movies,
Just shut up already!
even the Mark Wahlberg ones, and lives in the desert. Pan Am will help V take down an elite transport and kidnap the necessary Poindexter, though only if V helps her get revenge on some idiots that punked her a while back. After getting said revenge, Pan Am sees an opportunity for further revenge, and V can offer to help with that too, bringing us, the player, officially 4 quests, pyramid removed from the main thread of the plot. After all this, Pan Am helps us nab the boffin, whom we take to a roadside motel somewhere and tie to a chair. We ask him questions. Turns out he's only halfway sure we can exorcise the Johnny from our mnemonic. Our Ronin buddy Takemura shows up and offers the guy a glass of delicious-looking water.
It's positively empty promise.
We did not give you even a glass of water.
Next, we have to get in contact with Evelyn, the lady who provided us the information for the doomed heist in the first place. We need to know who hired her, because you figure the prospective buyer might have had a halfway decent idea of what to do with the thing they were buying, and the thing they were buying is eating our brain, so maybe they understand that behavior too. We go back to Evelyn's old place of business. She's missing. Her former associate, Judy, tells us that Evelyn had been working at a sex club recently before suddenly disappearing. Judy is worried about her. We infiltrate. We have a genuinely moving, sad conversation with a sex worker that somehow simultaneously transcends and sidesteps many of the literary tropes surrounding such conversations. We do a little detective digging. We deduce that Evelyn was attacked at work. We confront the owner. He tells us Evelyn's brain got messed up by some sinister wizard, so he sold her to some people who are into some seriously sick stuff. We infiltrate the seedy underbelly of the city's sex town. We talk to her doctor, Cyber John Waters, who has a clue as to the location of the sick freaks' psycho lair. Deep within a tactical espionage warehouse, we find Evelyn hooked up to some soul-sucking machines. We get her back to Judy's place. There's no use. Evelyn isn't going to speak ever again, much less tell us any helpful information. It turns out Evelyn's brain contains several recordings of some solitary Nancy Drewing she'd done prior to meeting her manufacturer. We dive into her memories and deduce that she'd been contracted by Night City's resident Haitian spiritual gang. the Voodoo Boys. The Voodoo Boys are the city's most elite sorcerers, so they won't dare help someone who doesn't prove themselves useful first. So we help them shoot up a shopping mall to gain access to a wayward surveillance van. It turns out the government has been watching and waiting to pounce on the Voodoo Boys. A representative of the government asks us to narc on the Voodoo Boys, and even though I fully realized the Voodoo Boys kinda suck and probably want to kill me the instant they figure out how to separate the relic from me, I am not a narc. 10 times out of 10, if a game offers me a choice between narking or not narking, I'm going to not narc. I don't even care if I'd be narking on someone who sucks. I'm not going to narc. Pleased for the moment by my killing skills, the Voodoo Boys escort me to a tub of ice in which they heat my brain up so hot I enter a technologically defamiliarized purgatory in which I converse with the 50-foot woman ghost of Keanu Reeves' ex-girlfriend, who 5 decades earlier had her own soul stolen by the Japanese megacorporation. During her 50 years of residence in the spirit realm, philosophies have so transcended human sense that her vocabulary is indistinguishable from a robot's. She tells us that if we can reach a MacGuffin place deep beneath the evil corporation's scary skyscraper, we can summon her. Only there can she delete Keanu Reeves.rar from our consciousness. In order to figure out how to breach the tower's security, we first have to agree to help Takemura get in contact with the dead rich man's daughter. The dead man's murderous son has usurped control of the megacorporation and has made it very difficult to talk to his sister, so we have to hack a parade float, which involves sneaking into a big warehouse, which requires an information-gathering stakeout on a nearby rooftop. During this stakeout, we see a cat, which Takemura remarks is the first one he has seen in all of his life. We hack the parade float, then attend the parade days later. Observing from rooftops, evading security, and solving problems as they arise, we get Takemura on board the parade float and face-to-face with the rich sister, Hanako, whom he kidnaps, surprising us. Takemura calls us to a shady, ramshackle place, the likes of which this city experiences no shortage. We enter to find Hanako not talking to him. We broach the subject of her brother's treachery, and she reacts with defiant disbelief. Moments later, violence finds us. Clearly, the murderous brother has mobilized the medium-sized nation's military-sized corporate guards to gun-find his missing sister at no cost to failing plaster. Yet we need no detective's license to deduce from the volume of the response that perhaps evil brother might not care if his sister died during the rescue efforts. In a city like this, making it look like an accident comes natural. In the chaos and flames and gunfire, our circumstantial friend Takemura gets lost. We can go back for him. Or not. I chose to go back for him. The guy rules. Why wouldn't I go back for him? Why wouldn't you go back for him? Why wouldn't you like this guy? He even texts you some Miyamoto Musashi quotes when you are faced with a difficult choice late in the game. You might not go back for him because Keanu Reeves tells you repeatedly not to waste your time.
He's a well-trained dog. Needs orders, that's all. And when he outlives his purpose, we'll flatline.
Throughout this whole second act of the game, Keanu Reeves talks to you constantly, either with a weird filter over his voice like he's inside your head, or clearly as a bell as his sexy ghost kicks the scenery's cans. You can see him, nobody else can. This gets awkward when you're talking to people he used to know. He's only alive for one person on Earth right now, so he does not keep any of his opinions to himself. His petty, aggressive, helpful, unhelpful, philosophical, humorous, and occasionally wistful observations pepper Cyberpunk 2077's main quest plot with a cuisine-like precision. He doesn't like anybody having anything to do with the corporation whose founder literally stole his soul 50 years ago, so he tells you to let Takemura die.
The f*** you doing? You lost it? He's beyond any sort of help.
Well, I saved him anyway. As we solve all 3 of these main plot threads, and as each of them ends with the disappointing information that if a solution exists, it's not going to be clean or easy, Keanu Reeves' ghost sails along a gentle character arc. At first, he attempts to manipulate us into killing ourselves. Then, eventually, he decides to help you. Depending on your choices at key points in the story, he might even start to feel good about deciding to help you. By the time you've chased all 3 leads to their dead ends, V's Keanu poisoning has crescendoed into fits of self-control loss. We awaken alongside Keanu's ghost at one point, haunting a blown-out apartment in which he once squatted when alive. Morosely and tersely, he communicates the melancholy of a wayward soul who respects his host enough to disappear for good. Eventually, Hanako decides she wants to talk. She sends a medium carrying her voice and mannerisms to our dumpy hotel room to communicate this message. She summons us to a fancy restaurant on a rainy night. She's cleared the place out so we can talk. She says she can't pretend anymore. She knows her brother sucks and has to die. She tells you she will help you get to the MacGuffin place if you help her deal with her brother first. The least you can do is tell her you'll think about it. Keanu's ghost hates the idea.
We ought to leave. Right now.
He throws a fit in the elevator. He does not want to work with those corpo freaks.
I want to save your life.
You end up passing out either from the stress or just because your time on Earth is almost up. Your doctor yells at you.
How much longer is this going to go on?
He says you have to make a choice about who to go kill with, or Keanu Reeves is going to replace your brain. He gives you a gun and 2 pills. One pill will awaken 100% Keanu. The other will shut him out and let you think for yourself. The gun will kill you if you want it to. Your dead best friend's girlfriend, Nicholas Winding Refn's Harley Quinn, takes you up to the roof and talks about the dead man's big dreams.
Gonna be a legend in this city.
She leaves you alone with your thoughts and Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves spells out the moral dilemma before you. You can either work with the corpo jerks, or you can kill yourself. V figures, no matter what they choose, innocent people are going to die. So, V decides to commit suicide. Keanu lays his hand on your shoulder and tells you made the only choice you could, and that he's glad to have known you. The camera floats up high above the city as a gunshot rings out, and the credits roll. Where I come from, neglecting to endure a last level or witness ultimate revelations or fight a final boss in order to commit suicide in a folding chair on a roof represents a pretty bold storytelling choice. It's especially remarkable to see it pulled off so quietly and not cheaply in a video game that frequently uses a tone-deaf, shock-baiting advertisement that features a man putting a pistol in his mouth due to workplace stress. Or you can choose to work with the corpo freaks.
You absolutely sure?
Takemura and the scientist from earlier pick you up. They tell you armed guards are keeping Hanako against her will in her mansion. You infiltrate, killing everyone. With Hanako, you helicopter over to the skyscraper. Hanako reveals to you that her murdered father, in fact, still lives in the form of a captured soul awaiting a suitable host. You must now find and neutralize the brother at Daddy's command. You strut into a meeting room situated inside of a miniature indoor genuine rainforest. At Hanako's insistence, you testify to the board of her brother's evil commission of murder. Before everything can go smoothly, it doesn't. You battle endless fools en route to an elevator. You battle further. You fight and kill Keanu Reeves' ex-murderer. You encounter the brother, sad in the penthouse. The lone, lorn creature knows the end has come. As the traitorous brother's sister gives him a gentle hizamakura, V heads out with the scientist toward the MacGuffin place. V's brain and soul approach the snapping point. V wakes up in space, in the corporation's orbiting laboratory. As V awakens, a doctor in the room makes what is miraculously Cyberpunk 2077's first and only reference to the ship of Theseus.
Is the ship of Theseus, dismantled into component parts and reassembled, still the same ship?
Keanu's ghost is gone. The doctors have removed the relic from V. V is kept in isolation in the laboratory, asked to perform numerous repetitive brain function tests. Days and weeks pass. V's only one-way contact with the outside world is a television news program which informs us that the murdered father's soul has fully inhabited his murderous son's dead body, sending ethical shock waves big enough to be felt from space. The brain function tests don't seem to indicate anything good. Our friend Takemura shows up to tell us that we cannot be saved with currently existing technology, so we face a choice. We can either go back to Earth and live the last 6 months of our life as best we can on our own terms, or we can let the corporate scientists extract our soul on purpose and archive it until they find us a suitable host, which they vaguely promise to do. By this point, we've been granted use of a telephone, though there's no one to call. Our Keanu Reeves head ghost has evaporated. Our best friend is dead, and we've forged practically no meaningful relationships elsewhere in our quest for a cure, unless you count the doctor who yells at us every time we see him.
How much longer is this going to go on?
Or our dead best friend's girlfriend who keeps trying to give us a tarot reading. In the end, we choose to let the narcs archive our soul. Our friend then leaves us. We tell him goodbye. We lay back in the pristine machine and gaze off into the ultimate void. When the credits finish rolling, 39 minutes later, a GOG Galaxy achievement informs me that only 1% of players reached this ending with Takemura still alive. That doesn't mean that 99% of players let him die. It might mean that, maybe not every player on record had finished the game yet. There's no way to tell from just looking at that 1% number if those players saved Takemura or let him die, or even if they got to that point at all. Though for the moment, I feel unique. I feel special. Cyberpunk 2077 made me feel special. That's how the game ends if you beeline directly through the main quest and stop for absolutely zero side diversions. Cyberpunk 2077 has 4 endings, sort of, each drastically different from the others, with many subtle or big variations dependent upon in-game story choices. And though in game-liker parlance, this depressing soul suck in space does not constitute Cyberpunk 2077's true ending, I dare say as an avid story dissector that this ending carries at least a single ring of truth. This is the only ending you get if you rushed straight through the game and failed to pick up the phone when acquaintances encountered during the main quest ask you to swing by so they can talk to you about something. As far as endings go, it's sci-fi as heck, and not just because somebody brings up the ship of Theseus during it. It gingerly brings up big themes about the definition of the human soul. We hear one AI construct argue with another about how alive either of them is. It shows us a world where corporations dangerously control more of everything than they do even in our real life, and that's saying something. And outside of speculative nuances, it hits upon plenty of quietly human moments as well. Our idealistic best friend dies dreaming that the world might not be so bad. We give ourselves to an uncertain future in the end because, in the end, we can't connect with anyone other than ourselves. So, even to the player who rushes through the story just so they can delete the game to make room on their shiny new next-generation video game console's shockingly tiny solid-state drive, Cyberpunk 2077 offers a generously nuanced and thought-provoking ending that both comments on that particular player's tendency to disengage socially with in-game characters and manages to feel pretty satisfyingly dystopian science-fictional in its own right. In order to access the other, truer endings, you need to have seen one or both of 2 convoluted side quest lines through to their conclusions. On top of that, 2 of these 3 total additional endings prominently feature your girlfriend or boyfriend, if you've completed the appropriate side quests necessary to unlock that girlfriend or boyfriend's achievement. Each of these 2 primary side quest lines unlocks a different final mission, which climaxes in a final boss battle with Keanu's 50 years ago murderer before delivering you onto the MacGuffin place, where you face the choice to either let Keanu keep your body, unlocking one remarkably moving, bittersweet ending, or say goodbye to Keanu, unlocking one of 2 differently bittersweet endings dependent on your final mission route. One of the keep your body bittersweet endings shows V leaving the city to make a home in the elsewhere with the Borderlands cosplayers. The other keep your body bittersweet ending shows V as the ultimate bad butt biggest legend in town, still chasing a cure with only 6 months left on the life clock. Then there's the mysterious 5th ending with a ridiculously difficult final mission and a slightly less bittersweet tone from the others. I make it sound like unlocking all these endings is as simple as flipping a coin. It's not. The requisite side quest lines to access these 2 alternate final missions that lead to these ending choices are hours long, lavishly produced, massively AAA, generously chunky segments of video game. This brings us to the one element of Cyberpunk 2077 that I love the most. Its structure. Cyberpunk 2077 shows us how all big-budget open-world games should be structured. If you absolutely positively need to make a big-budget AAA open-world game, for God's sake, do it like this. Here you might say, isn't it just a single-player open-world game with a lot of side quests? Aren't there lots of those? Well, yeah. Cyberpunk 2077 is a single-player open-world game with a lot of side quests, and yes, there are sort of a lot of those, though that's a little reductive. There are even a lot of single-player open-world video games with lots of different kinds of side quests. That's what Cyberpunk 2077 is. Where Cyberpunk 2077 truly excels is in the how of the side quests. I'll admit, they're on average not as great as the side quests I've played in The Witcher 3, though where they're good, they're golden. Like any video game aspiring to a modern game-liker of the early 2020s' money, Cyberpunk 2077 seeks to provide hits of entertainment suitable to all schedules. If you have 4 or so nighttime hours alone in your house to hunker down, you can step into the next main story mission. If you've got 20 minutes between breakfast and work, you might tackle some of the police scanner narc missions, which are basically bare-bonesly story-glorified random encounters that yield loot and varying experience. If you've got an hour before dinner, maybe a gig from one of the game's fixers might interest you. In Cyberpunk 2077, gig means mission and fixer means mission giver. Many of them are frivolous popcorn excursions, though every once in a while one leads you directly into a sprawling combat encounter in a gorgeously graphic space, and always ends with an adequate or perfect portion of pulp fictional filler episodicality. And if perhaps it rains on a Saturday morning, so you only want to walk the dog in a circle around your apartment building instead of through Central Park, where he's gonna get his paws all muddy because you refuse to cramp his rebellious spirit by putting stupid little booties on his feet, you can light up one of Cyberpunk 2077's many side jobs. Side jobs are what Cyberpunk 2077 calls side quests. Side jobs account for probably most of Cyberpunk 2077's total game length. A side job might last for a total of 20 mega cinematic minutes, or it might offer you big moments which, depending on your dialogue or conflict choices, might lead you to a 2-hour-long journey through 4 tonally distinct episodes with a beginning, middle, and philosopher Keanu Reeves' monologue or 2 each.
What matters is that guy decided to take up the gauntlet. My man.
I didn't play all of Cyberpunk 2077's side jobs, though I did play most of them. I drew the line at Grimes, by which I mean I drew the line on one particular side of Grimes. I'm saying I did play the Grimes side job, the side job where Grimes literally voices a character, though I drew the line there, afterward. What I'm saying is, I didn't pursue any of the side jobs written around the personalities of YouTubers. Unless that stupid talking gun was a YouTuber, or that stupid talking vending machine was a YouTuber. God, I hope they weren't YouTubers. Man, that stupid talking vending machine side quest felt like an elaborate reference to something some guy probably said once in one episode of a podcast whose hosts really like Elon Musk. You know, maybe it's possible for a really cool person to like Elon Musk. I just haven't met them. And I definitely won't. CD Projekt Red, if you'd like to contract me to write and voice a character in a side job for Cyberpunk 2077 DLC, my business email address is prominently visible in my Twitter profile. I ain't cheap, though my idea is pretty good. The breadth and variety of Cyberpunk 2077's side jobs inspires me. I've often wondered about a hypothetical 1001 Nights of games. The Arabian Nights is a story made of stories. So many marketers tease open-world games with highfalutin phraseology like an engine for stories. And some of them are getting pretty close to hitting the broadside of that particular ballpark. Cyberpunk 2077 gives me the closest I've ever felt to hope that we're going to have that someday soon. Maybe even before I'm 60 years old. Heck, maybe even before I'm 55. I love the hugeness of Cyberpunk 2077's Night City. I love the visual and geometrical density of it. I love the mysticality with which these numerous side quests bring us back to locations which previously whipped 180 miles per hour past our speeding motorbike, ask us to kindly stop the vehicle and allow us an opportunity to step into a previously forbidden interior, utterly and lushly alive with the fruits of a 3D art team's toil. There's that old cliche wherein a hard-boiled man gazes out a train window and soliloquizes that a story is happening in every one of these windows. Even the ones with the lights off, even the ones with nobody home. Night City is so vast, and Cyberpunk 2077's side quests barely introduce us to the interiors of 1% of its many buildings. They could add side quests to this game for a decade or more. Brazenly, some of the absolute best side quests of Cyberpunk 2077 don't involve the pulling of a single trigger. I want to tell you about my favorite side quest in Cyberpunk 2077. We're deep into the story spoilers part of the video, though here's a special double spoiler. You very well might have played the entire game, yet not seen this side quest. You might have even played this side quest and not seen the ending I got for it, or even half of the missions that I saw for it. That's the level of richness we're dealing with here. So if you don't want spoilers for the side quest called Sinner Man, maybe blast some 9-inch nails for a couple minutes. One of your fixers, Wakako Okada, contacts you about a client who wants you to kill the man who killed a relative of his. However, the job is double complicated. For one thing, the killer is in police custody. For another, the client wants to come with you to spectate the assassination. You meet the guy in a van. You drive to the police transport route and intercept the police vehicle. The client gets excited, jumps out, brandishes a gun, and is immediately shot in the head and killed. You now meet a strange trio of individuals. A bulky, tough, swatted-out policeman, a pink-haired jerkweed TV producer, and an orange-clad, sad-faced, penitent prisoner. Your contract is to kill the prisoner, though to do so, you're going to have to kill the cop as well. I mean, one less cop isn't really any kind of net loss to the world. While you're mulling it over, the prisoner asks you to talk with him. Apparently, many players kill him and take the reward, which blows my mind. It's a reward. You could kill like 3 random gang members and get twice as much as that reward. And also, why would you kill him? Look at this guy. You can tell just looking at him that he's got something going on. You accept his offer to the exhaustion of the TV producer and the anger of the cop. The prisoner, a convicted murderer awaiting execution, has been taken into the custody of this big-shot TV producer for a reason yet unclear to us. We talk to him of religion and redemption. Eventually, the vehicle arrives at its destination, a house in a poor neighborhood. A woman greets the prisoner happily. We drink a glass of water and listen to their conversation. This prisoner killed this woman's brother. Then he wrote a letter to her from prison. He had begged her for forgiveness. She granted it. They became friends. The mother arrives to interrupt our water drinking. She angrily kicks the prisoner out. We leave and wait in the car. Now we ride with the prisoner to a diner at which he's requested to eat his last meal. On our way out of the car, the TV producer quietly offers us money to walk away. She's trying to get this man to do something for her, and she doesn't want you instilling any doubt. We can say yes and walk away with a lot of money, or we can say no and dine with the man. The man has, it turns out, offered to be executed while wearing brain dance recording hardware. The producers will edit his anguish and suffering into a program that millions will download to experience themselves, either out of religious interest, sick thrills, bragging rights, or some sinister trinitas mixture of the three. Of course, the manner of execution is crucifixion. The entertainment producer has found a man, true believer religious enough to have all his neurons high fidelity captured as he dies on a cross for the sins of all witnesses.
Because Stevenson's got a little something that's in short supply, but in very high demand. That little something's called authenticity.
As you discuss innocuous topics like movies and hobbies with the man over a burger and fries, and this revelation sinks upon you, your mind might race. You've seen billboards all over the city advertising this, the single word, passion. You recall Mel Gibson's artful gore-shock schlock film, The Passion of the Christ, of which Pope John Paul II said, "It is as it was." You remember your brother watching the film with wide believer eyes. You remember your horror film fan buddies watching the film for the makeup. You remember your classical PhD friend lauding the Aramaic. You recall several people being like,
Lol, why was Satan a girl?
and you recall many more persons discussing the film as a sort of endurance contest. Well, here's that, escalated properly into 2077. Now you recall the world-building tidbits littered throughout the game's plot about XBDs, or extreme brain dances. These are illegally obtained brain recordings, sometimes the products of actual murderers, portraying the perfectly real, sometimes not accidental deaths of unfortunate people. XBDs are criminal underground GoPro fails of the late 21st century, the postmodern rotten.com. From your place in the real modern era in which the phrase televised execution has always loomed inevitable like a threat to decency, you now sense the other side of the commentary, that capital T, the capital I industry will find a way to commoditize and productify anything underground.
Authenticity.
Remember this notion for later. Choose the wrong, we'll call them wrong for the moment. Choose the wrong dialogue options and the prisoner will back out of the filmed crucifixion, earning himself a boring mainstream execution and you the ineffectual anger of the producers. Choose the quote-unquote correct dialogue options and the prisoner will go forward with the crucifixion. Choose all the correct dialogue options and the prisoner will ask you to hammer in the nails. A first, I believe, for the first-person action RPG genre.
Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and save us.
Do you not fear God? You stand condemned under the same sentence. We are punished justly. Remember me when you...
As I sat in the dressing room, choosing lines from the Lord's Prayer to recite together with this condemned man before his desperate final offering of meaning to the world, I felt a swirl of bizarre texture reaching back into the history of my own Catholic childhood memories. Somehow, at the end of all this, the sight of tactical Ray-Bans Keanu Reeves standing hands prayer-folded and head bowed before a raised, smoke machine smoke-shrouded crucifix didn't even strike me as kitschy, much less tacky. Now that's what I call narrative design. To reiterate, this quest started with a simple directive to shoot an unarmed man and collect a medium-sized yet insignificant reward. It could have ended there, or it could have ended at a table in a house, or it could have ended outside a restaurant, or it could have ended inside that restaurant, or it could have ended in a dressing room. For me, it ended here. I didn't even know about where else it could have ended until I combed through IGN.com's Cyberpunk 2077 wiki guide on IGN.com during what I affectionately refer to as the dishwashing phase of footage capture. First of all, wow. Whatever IGN.com pays its guides writers, it's not enough. Actually, I know how much IGN.com pays its guides writers, and it definitely is not enough. That Cyberpunk 2077 hides so many rabbit holes within rabbit holes of plot nuance within one side mission that you can skip entirely by telling the fixer you're not interested amounts to a bold gesture I personally consider salute-worthy. The fixer just calls you on the phone at a completely random time and asks if you're interested in a job. If you say no, you'll never see any of this. If you say yes, you might not see most of this. And apparently, if you're some kind of freak who chooses all the correct options purely out of coincidence like I did, you'll wind up feeling quadruply weird when the producer texts you in-game days later while you're in the middle of killing some gangers on a rooftop to thank you for your help making the scene really pop with your first-person Jesus nail hammering skills. So, with its side quests, Cyberpunk 2077 carries the potential to make a guy like me feel a little bit weird for at least 3 different reasons, all at the same time. That ain't bad.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Looking back upon the whole of my Cyberpunk 2077 experience, I realize how confidently the narrative designers essentialize side quests. The very beginning of the game, in the Street Kid route, which I chose for my first playthrough, shows V gazing into a mirror, setting a broken nose. I realize V obtained the broken nose in an off-camera side quest. The first thing Street Kid V does is accept a side quest from a bullying gang guy to help a buddy out of debt. When we meet Jackie Wells, we promptly see a fast-forward montage portraying our growing best friendship concocted over 6 months of side quests. When we rejoin the present day, it's in medias res, in a car in the parking garage beneath the site of yet another side quest. This side quest never ties back into the main narrative of the game, yet it does tie into another side quest late in the endgame. These hinted side quests exist to deftly sketch V's occupation as a side quest doer. The story starts on the eve of both the game's and the protagonist's first main story quest. After we talk to Dexter Deshawn about doing his heist, we have 3 main story missions to choose in any order. Offering us a choice of the order to do the main story missions impresses immediately upon us the value of choice. Cyberpunk 2077's marketing hyped up the game's tempestuous choice structure, yelling unto us that actions have consequences in so many differing tones of voice that it's probably spelunky difficult to come away feeling like they pulled it off perfectly. However, the one mission featured in CD Projekt Red's early gameplay footage release managed to still impress me even when I knew all the possibilities. In that particular mission, you have to obtain a high-tech robot thing from members of the more machine-than-man gang, Maelstrom. You can pay $10,000 for it outright, avoiding conflict entirely. You can give them an encrypted money shard from some shady military people who will then launch a hacking program, or you can decrypt the money shard and offer it consequence-free. Or you can simply say the wrong thing in dialogues and upset the gang members into murderous rage. Should you choose the gun violence route, you can either kill them all loudly, kill them all with stealth, or creep around avoiding them. You can battle the boss, or you can stealth around the boss. You can even find and rescue the gang's deposed leader from a prison. Free said deposed leader and kill the usurper, and you'll enable a side quest later. Or you can leave the deposed leader imprisoned and kill their current leader, meaning you'll have to deal with their new leader much later. Though if you're the killing type, you might not be thinking that far ahead. If you are thinking that far ahead, you can stealth right past the leader on your way out, which in your line of work suffices a little bit for diplomacy. If you stealth past him, though, you miss the opportunity to loot off his corpse an iconic gun that I personally stopped using one mission later. When Cyberpunk 2077 first pitches you the main story task of securing this MacGuffin robot, the lingering hint in the air is that the alternative to meeting with the shady corporate weapons dealer with the money in their pocket to pay for the robot relatively conflictlessly is do some side quests. Because that's what your character does professionally, they're a side quester. Also, they just moved into a new apartment and bought a new car as per the opening montage, so they're broke, canonically. So many narrative hints raft you downstream toward the notion of doing side quests of your own volition. It's clean. I genuinely love how cleanly Cyberpunk 2077 handles this. So, by the nature of the game's very structure, the easiest way to beeline through Cyberpunk 2077's story campaign is to literally just do a couple easy gigs to build the money for the Maelstrom mission. You can bypass the optional meeting with the weapons dealer altogether and skip the extreme-length, elaborate gunfight dungeon and boss battle. In this way, you're preparatorily parceling out the total kill violence required to achieve your plot-required ends into more bite-sized flavor crystals. However, in doing it this way, you end up befriending the current gang leader, and in doing that, you'll miss out on the opportunity to rescue the more interesting deposed gang leader. Cooperate with the weapons dealer and give the gang members the poisoned money, then deal with the gun battle that ensues, and you'll have the option later of sending a flirtatious text to the weapons dealer, resulting in a one-night stand in a motel from which you earn an iconic dildo sword. Of course, if you kill the gang's current leader and please the weapons narcs, you'll wind up meeting the gang's new, much worse leader during a presentationally exquisite side quest deep into my personal favorite long chain of endgame side quests. In other words, if you were violent during the initial story mission, the gang is going to repay you with extreme violence during the side quest. Seriously, they lead you into a kill box, crack open an autosave on you, and totally own you. I had to retry this like 8 times. Yet if you play the initial story mission more or less diplomatically, you encounter a leader about as friendly as these particular guys get, and you avoid all violent consequences. Thus, side quests and the main quest interlock like a Cordura weave at least once in Cyberpunk 2077's 100-some-hour running time. This is, as plain-spokenly as I can say it, Cyberpunk 2077's greatest strength. It is the magic trick that makes the show worth showing up for. When the consequences of your actions in that long-ago, perhaps forgotten very first story mission come back to bite your jugular late in the endgame, it just so happens to be during one of the many lengthy side quest lines that result in the unlocking of an alternate final mission. These side quest lines are, by my reckoning, the most important part of Cyberpunk 2077 to analyze. Chapter 2 of Cyberpunk 2077 lets you approach 3 plot threads in any order you want. To recapitulate, you must talk to Keanu Reeves' ex-girlfriendish friend Rogue, who sets you up with a nomad outlaw named Pan Am, who helps you heist a passenger from a corporate convoy after you help her get her truck back from some nomad freaks. You must ask Evelyn Parker, who gave you the intel for your failed heist mission, who hired her, though she's gone missing, and her former associate Judy Alvarez needs your help finding her, and when you do find her, it leads you into a conflict between Netrunner authorities and the Voodoo Boys gang. Also, you must help the disgraced Ronin Takemura get in contact with his dead boss's daughter, which involves infiltrating a warehouse, hacking a corporate parade float, and performing a daring heist. These 3 threads each involve multiple mandatory quests, and they form the backbone of Cyberpunk 2077's entire story. Sometime after the end of Pan Am's and Judy's quest lines, you might get a phone call asking you for a favor. You can say yes or no. These girls did help you out, so only a freak would say no, in my opinion, though if you say yes, you enter into the respective character's final side quest line. Judy wants to organize a revenge revolution at her deceased former associate and lover's corruptly dangerous workplace. Pan Am needs your help rescuing her clan leader from some psychos, and then she asks you to help hijack a military convoy to score some toys to strengthen the clan's defenses. At the end of Pan Am's quest line, you can potentially unlock romance if you're playing as a male protagonist, though you by default unlock an alternate final mission wherein you, V, ask Pan Am and the Nomads to help organize a raid on an Arasaka construction site with tunnel access to the MacGuffin place. This results in a tonally drastically different ending from the sad sellout one you get if you attack Arasaka with inside help. If you see Judy's quests through to the end, and you are playing as a female V, and you made all the correct dialogue choices, you unlock a gorgeous scuba diving mission. Then you can choose whether or not to have sex with her. After that, you can choose whether or not you want her to be your girlfriend. If you don't want Judy to be your girlfriend, I'm sure plenty of people in the comments would like the phone number of whoever supplies you with whatever you're smoking. Should you be girlfriend Judy? You'll see her in the Pan Am and the Nomads route's particularly bittersweet ending, together and happy with you. Or should you get the quote-unquote best ending, you'll see her basically break up with you. So we've got one girl, the heterosexual male's romance choice, whose quests lead us directly into one of the endings. We've got another girl, the lesbian route, whose quests spin off of the end of a main quest line and result in a variation to the alternate endings. The other two optional romance partners also show up in ending variations, though they exist different meta layers removed from the main story. River Ward, the romance lead, evidently angled toward heterosexual North American women who, as recently as November 2020, wondered on social media why they never made a sequel to Vin Diesel's excellent 2002 spy film
Triple X.
Like, hello, they made two, and one of them was not the best film ever made, though the other one kind of is. So it's your fault for not paying attention? River Ward is literally a police detective who you meet during a side quest initiated at a purely random part of the game. On the side quest where you meet River Ward, you help him expose police corruption. However, he does not quit being a cop, even when you point out to him that this is a sign he should quit being a cop. His romance quest involves tracking a serial kidnapper through a series of detective missions quite luxuriously inspired by the excellent film The Cell, starring Jennifer Lopez and Vincent D'Onofrio. Your date with him includes stirring a jambalaya pot and playing an AR game with his niece and nephew. The gay male-oriented romance option, Carrie Eurodyne, is Johnny Silverhand's ex-bandmate, and you only instigate his romance quests after completely playing through Johnny's quests. I'll get to Johnny's quests in a minute. First, though, I've gotta say, I think it might say something about big-budget AAA video games in general that the heterosexual male's love interest is the only one mandatorily directly resultant in an alternate true ending. The lesbian choice's optional quests happen immediately after the end of a mandatory chain of story quests. The gay male choice happens all the way at the end of optional quests that issue out of completing 3 full lines of main mandatory quests, and the heterosexual woman's choice happens only after digging 10 hours too deep into a side quest that a lot of players might never even think to do. What that says about video games, I don't know. Somebody else can feel free to interpret that for me. Though I feel like anybody who plays through Cyberpunk 2077 with the explicit purpose of romancing Pan Am Palmer is also the kind of person who'd choose to tell this Polish fanfiction author circa 2003's concept of Harley Quinn if she were my well-behaved non-criminal girlfriend that she is, and I quote, lovely just hours after she learns her boyfriend died of skyscraping fall damage and gun bullets. These romance quest lines and the mandatory or optional side quests that usher us into them are crucial to untangling the dream of Cyberpunk 2077. Choices being one of the game's main themes, these final big side quest lines require you to choose whom to connect with. When we first do side quests, it's to connect with ourselves, to role-playingly fuse our real human consciousness onto the protagonists, to get into their mindset. In the endgame, with all the story's themes washing over you, you engage with these people, most likely, because you find them interesting. The slightly varying degrees of main plot adjacency of each of these characters' plots makes their troubles feel urgent without drifting into tangentiality. That Cyberpunk 2077 keeps all of these perfectly optional fits my definition of the ideal video game structure. Doing all 5 of these side quest lines, Pan Am, Judy, River, Carrie, and Johnny, took me 32 hours of playing. That's about the same length as all the campaign missions. And I can't stress enough how tonally and game designedly different these quest lines are. Judy's quests require a lot of conversational diplomacy and sneaking around. Pan Am's quests are guns blazingly cyber cowboy video game nonsense. River Ward's quests require a lot of adventure gamey exploration and investigation with a little bit of mystery solving. And then there's the Johnny Silverhand quests. After you finish the 3 mandatory plot quest threads of Act 2, Johnny Silverhand may or not ask a favor of you. He wants you to help him kill Adam Smasher, the man who caught him 50 years ago and delivered him to the soul-sucking corpo freaks. To find Adam Smasher, you need to talk to Rogue. Johnny wants you to take some pills that will give him complete control of your body. If you trust him, well, he goes on an all-night binge-drinking detective adventure summarized in a masterful montage. His erstwhile could-have-been lover, Rogue, agrees to help you and him track down a lead on Smasher. You endure a beefy side quest with, poetically, no elegant end. However, you do wind up with Johnny's old gun and Johnny's old Porsche. Sitting on some trash in a junkyard you've just learned houses Johnny's remains somewhere, you and Johnny have a long, poignant, tricky decision-filled conversation which silently impacts multiple ending variations. Then, another side quest line opens up. We're 2 optional side quest lines deep now. This side quest line is simple. Johnny just wants you to call Rogue and ask her out on a date. You let Johnny take over at an old drive-in movie theater.
All right. Do your thing. I'll watch.
Okay.
Wham bam
Gotta be the
shalala.
past then.
All right, let's go.
Guess we really are. Well done.
Where the would-be sex scene with Rogue ends with a mature forlornness.
Johnny, I can't.
Now that another favor has ended in failure, Johnny presumes to ask you for another favor. He wants you to let him talk to Carrie Eurodyne, his ex-bandmate and, I think, ex-lover. You break into Carrie's house, let Johnny play a little guitar, and have a long, burnt-out chat with this realistically forlorn, now successful megastar, during which, all too familiar to guys like me, the conversation of getting the band back together comes up. Now you have to round up the old members. We're now 4 optional side quest lines deep. One of these bandmate rounding up side quests requires you to endure the consequences of your actions from the Maelstrom mission. One of them introduces you to 2 band members who hate each other. You must choose which one of these 2 people you've just met to keep and which one to kick out. So even when you do let Johnny take over and play the guitar for the glorious reunion gig, the band still isn't fully back together. You've spent hours of lushly graphicked and extravagantly Keanu Reeves'd AAA video game acquiescing to a ghost's requests, and for it, you receive no monetary reward. Now, 5 optional quest lines removed, the gay male romance option comes up. Carrie Eurodyne calls you about hanging out. He is having a midlife crisis. He's, I guess he's about 70 years old, though rich people live a long time in the dystopian future, I guess. His midlife crisis concerns some Japanese pop band covering one of his songs. You help him deal with it, get over himself, agree to collaborate with the band, and then help him steal and then burn his crooked agent's yacht before having a mesmerizing conversation about getting old on a beautiful twilit beach. Carrie's a little too computer smash mouth for whatever my tastes might be, though I will never forget the tenderness of that burning yacht spectating quiet moment with Carrie on that beach. 5 side quest lines removed from Cyberpunk 2077's brutally cathartic, ultimately depressing ending. Completing the mission with Rogue that nets you Johnny's gun and possibly his Porsche unlocks a second final mission, one in which V pops the red pill and lets Johnny take over. Johnny finally consummates his decades-long love affair with Rogue before, just like old Timesley, helicopter attacking Arasaka Tower. When we arrive unto the MacGuffin place, we face a final choice. Johnny has gotten us here so that we can delete him. All the side quests, we took him down, even if we didn't finish all of them, have only shown him that his life is, in fact, over. He is willing to shred his soul for you. We know that if we let Johnny sacrifice himself, we'll only live for 6 months. Yet if Johnny keeps our body, he'll live the rest of a normal lifespan. V's in-game argument is that Silverhand could get better and longer use out of this old meat than you possibly could. Silverhand's argument is that you need to take what's yours, no matter how much of it there is. You, the real person, the fly on the wall during this conversation between V and Silverhand, might have so much respect for Johnny's willingness to perform this sacrifice that you want to let him keep your body. The first time I reached this decision point, I'd neglected to make any saves at all during the final mission. I knew that I'd have to restart the whole final quest line just to get here again. It wouldn't let me save at the decision point, so I paused the game for 3 minutes. I stood in the kitchen. I drank a liter of ice-cold water, even though my gastroenterologist would later tell me to drink room-temperature water. I sat back down on the sofa. My throat had been a little bit sore for a couple days, so I popped another honey herb Ricola lozenge, told Johnny to keep my body. Earlier, Rogue had warned me not to let Johnny fool me. She'd said he'd never change. She'd said that everything he ever did, he did for himself, and that in the end, he'd try to make it feel like my choice. Though the humanity I see in Johnny's ending thrilled me. He takes his neighbor, the son of an abusive alcoholic dad, to a thrift store, buys a hideously expensive fancy guitar, visits V's grave, and then mock-accidentally leaves the guitar in the kid's car before getting on a bus out of the city. If we choose to let V keep their body, we see the only one of all these endings that hints at future DLC. V is rich, living in a penthouse apartment with their romantic love interest. Let's call her Judy. V has only a few months left to live. Judy wishes V would slow down, stop doing side quests, and just enjoy being rich. V says, "No, baby, I can't quit those side quests." V chooses side quests over Judy and then wields a pistol while spacesuit floating toward a casino space station for the mega rich, which absolutely sounds like the sort of place to set a piece of DLC I'd buy for $20. Whatever you choose. If you engaged with Johnny's quests even a little bit, it's going to be tough to choose either way. If you've seen Johnny through the entiring, depressing, hospice-esque quest line, it rains heavy gravity on these final moments. It's a bit of narrative magic. In summary, Keanu Johnny Utah Mnemonic Silverhand Reeves represents the soul of Cyberpunk 2077. And he's not the only soul. For a game of such big, yelling graphics, edgy, topical quote-unquote satire, and more game design systems than you can shake an aircraft carrier at, Cyberpunk 2077 genuinely excels at having soul. Like I said, I'll never forget Carrie playing the guitar forlornly on the deck of a stolen yacht. I hope to do the same myself someday. When Judy offers to let you sleep on her sofa after you just sat offering her moral support through an all-nighter of a work meeting, it might stir up recollections of a not dissimilar evening long ago in Chicago. At the very end, on a quiet rooftop, faced with the decision of which final mission to take to the ending, Johnny Silverhand tells you that if you want to call anyone on the phone to say goodbye, now's the time to do it. Keanu's trademark understated performance tells us there's some people he wished he'd said goodbye to. This is the narrative designer's way of asking you to pick which one of your steady polyamorous lovers you want to feature in the ending cutscene. Though Keanu's reaction to your choice lends it something more. When you choose
Judy,
which is the correct choice for non-freaks, he says,
"Yeah, even I've grown to like her."
And you believe him. You believe him precisely because he cynically cautioned you about getting involved with her. He told you she was just using you. By now, though, you and Johnny have spent basically a lifetime becoming one another. The more hours you plunked into those side quests, the more poetic it feels. For my first full playthrough, I played Cyberpunk 2077 as a girl. I figured, I'm already gonna be a gun-toting hacker, high-speed traversing a neon-glowy alternate kitsch future dark dystopian megalopolis on a motorbike tantamounting shameless Akira fanfiction. Why not do so as a girl? I found this worked eerily well for the late story theme wrestling match between V and Johnny. At first, Johnny, an angry, unbottled genie, tries to manipulate V into suicide. Eventually, after so many near-death experiences and philosophical after-ruminations, Johnny respects you enough to offer you the sage advice required to get his soul deleted from existence. Johnny accepts you and helps you. And in doing so, he might earn your respect. I find that Cyberpunk 2077 traverses this rickety bridge quite deftly. So, Fred Wood, aka That's My Trunks on Twitter.com, though at first a man occupying a woman's brain does in fact feel a little gender politically grotesque, it certainly blossoms into something expectation upending. On a level that Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't quite work hard enough to even dare to insinuate, though this is my video, so I'm gonna say it anyway, it's almost like the relic chip represents pregnancy. V is a mother.
That the biochip?
No. Third trimester cramp.
Ha ha ha.
Keanu Reeves is her child. Will she sacrifice herself for her child, or will her child sacrifice himself for her? I'll just go ahead and say it. Female V is canon, which of course means that Judy is canon. River's okay. I'd like that guy if he wasn't literally a cop. So I had to kill him. In the next section, I'm going to talk about what I do not like about Cyberpunk 2077. I apologize in advance to severe fans of the game. I do not like a lot about this game. If you, a severe Cyberpunk liker, insist on watching this next segment, please keep in mind all of these things I have in this section explained I liked about the game. I assure you, none of these compliments were backhanded, except the ones that were obviously backhanded. I love everything I said I loved here. I love the sheer volume of the game. Whatever else I will go on to say in this review, I promise you, I loved the way this city looked and felt. I love the interiors of the apartments. I love the idea of a game so brutally full of stuff. It's absolutely wild how much stuff they crammed into here. I loved how side quests brought you back to familiar neighborhoods you might have driven by or through a dozen times, though now, just this once, you have the invitation to access an interior that's just infinitely more detailed than you'd have ever thought it could be. I loved the flow of the plot. Some of the understated, subtle narrative design nuances of the game will go on to influence games for decades. I genuinely love the structure of Cyberpunk 2077. I love the title screen. I love how late the title splash comes up. It took me like 10 hours to get to the title screen the first time. I love that real-time intro montage. We need more montages in games. I love that they got a Japanese actor who speaks English as a second language to voice Takemura, a character who speaks English as a second language.
People like me, either we are doing well, or we are in a grave.
I love brain dances. They're moody bluesy and virtual reality recordings captured by real-time individuals and feature during many mystery-solving segments of the game. Finally, a video game that makes me feel like Gene Hackman in The Conversation. I gotta say, I would love a real good couple of these brain dances in the DLC. I personally could not imagine being a good enough game designer or level designer or narrative designer to make a truly excellent one of these. Good job, whoever did the one in the River Ward side quests. The ones with the dairy farm. Those were creepy as heck. I love the utter density, this city whipping past my speeding motorbike. I salute the audacity that dared to create this with less than a quarter of the person power of a Grand Theft Auto development team. I love that the story is just confidently written enough to quote Frankenstein, Marcus Aurelius, Ernest Hemingway, and Aristotle without acting like a jerk about it. I love the architecture and rooms. I'd live in some of these rooms. I would live in Judy's apartment. I would live in V's apartment. I would live in this guy's secret hidden bunker home office, though not anywhere else in his filthy, roach-infested apartment. I love the graphics. I love the snappiness of the effects. Sometimes stuff blow up so good I just shoot it for fun.
Sometimes
I love the boldness of an imagined alternate timeline in which people will still evidently wallet care about guitars. when they have computers literally inside their eyes. I love Keanu Reeves. I love Judy and Carrie. I love some of these jackets. I love the way the cars look at this cowboy car. I love some of the combat encounter geometry. Some of it is genuinely as inspiringly old-fashionedly amateurish as GoldenEye's. I love the look of this menu wherefrom a doctor equips computer components into your central nervous system. I like the gunshot sound effects. Very well mixed. I just don't really like any of the combat or the driving or virtually any of the character progression metagame. So let's talk about that next. Don't worry, Cyberpunk likers. I promise I'm not going to say anything so bold as Cyberpunk 2077 feels like it was designed by an unpaid intern with a gun to their head. I'll be a little nicer than that, I promise. Well, that's the end of story number 3. I mostly like this one. I mostly enjoyed the experience of watching this one. Again, as always, you can't watch something that you made without wanting to change about 800 things. Not gonna change 800 things, not even gonna change one thing. We're changing 0 things. It's just this is definitely the oldest segment in the video. It is the first segment. I outlined this segment first. I wrote this segment first. I rehearsed this segment first. We shot this segment first. I edited it first. I finalized it first. I exported it first, and I watched it first. I chose to watch this one first, hence the same outfit, same day. I initially intended part 3 as a sort of half of a duology with part 4. Together they make up a sort of a diptych. Is a diptych a thing? It sounds horrible. Look that up on dictionary.com and make sure that's an actual thing. So in other words, if you skipped from the intro to part 3, congratulations, I think you chose the path that I, as the writer, producer, director, editor, star of this video, that's the path I chose as well. It is, however, definitely the oldest part of the video in terms of the ideas are the oldest, because this was my whole thing here at Action Button is I try to be positive about all of the games. I made this series because I wanted to just tell you the stuff that I liked about the games that I like. Through telling you all of the stuff that I like, you can intuit what I dislike about the stuff that I dislike pretty well, I think, from hearing me explicitly state what I do like. However, again, opinions as growing, maturing creatures, I now 7 months after writing this segment that you just watched, this segment which was forged from an outline crafted quite meticulously, carefully during the play experience. As I played, I wanted to capture the positivity because I saw so much negativity about the game that when I played, I wanted to capture the positivity. So that outline reflected only my positive experiences, and then I had to excavate the negative experiences, which if you watch part 4, which I sort of recommend as a good follow-up to this. Also, if you watch part 4 after watching part 3, then you can't watch part 6. And I like part 6. Captured all the positivity fresh, hot, as it happened. My outlining, quote-unquote, writing mindset while playing the game was, let's take meticulous notes on everything good. Sift out the bad stuff later. And I think in this segment, it's in there. And I feel like a lot of you who might not have actually played the game are going to perceive, you're gonna understand why I liked what I liked, especially if you've watched my Tokimeki Memorial video. I should take these glasses off. They're probably very reflective. I think if you watch this segment, you're gonna be able to tell why I liked what I liked. Though I do feel like I could have honed in on it a little better. The decision-making aspect of this game, of having to choose very particular things at very particular times. You're given these choices of dialogue and whatnot. Whole side quests can just be locked out forever if you don't choose the right dialogue thing. Whole relationships with characters. can all just be completely locked out. I think that's kind of incredible. And I think like romancing Judy in the game was actually quite difficult. And I had to roll the save back later. I was trying to play with no guides. And I figured Judy was probably a romanceable character and she just never called me. There was just some ultra incidental line of dialogue that I missed during the first Judy side quest, where just the second one just never happened. And I think that sort of thing is beautiful. It's wonderful that they put all these possibilities in there to craft and hone a different experience for every person who plays the game. And I think that's the best thing about this game. I took notes. I think I went a little bit too hard on NPR. I joked too much about NPR at the beginning there. If I were going back and letting myself edit this video, I would cut a little bit of that. I mean, it's hard to cut any of it without losing the whole thing. Though I do like the calculation of how many more Twitter followers NPR has than me. It's not funny. I thought that sets it up well, is that NPR is, they are the corp and I'm the cyberpunk in this scenario. I just think it kind of went on a little too long and most of it wasn't funny. What else was I gonna say? When I say I like the graphics in the game, I really did like the graphics. The graphics are definitely a plus. I did a whole segment about the graphics. Story number 2 is entirely about the graphics and graphics in general, graphics in video games. Have I ever really been a graphics guy? Well, I think if you're a video game person, you're kind of a graphics person. By default, video being part of the name of the thing, it's possible to be a video game player and not be a graphics person. For the most part, I just enjoyed the luxury of these lavish graphics on my huge TV out of my enormous, heavy graphics card. One thing I didn't talk about in story number 2, and I know that people who watch story number 2 about the graphics are going to get upset because I talk about the PC and the graphics. They're gonna accuse me of being a graphics hound, a pixel puppy, a polygon coyote. Is that a thing? The truth of the matter is, me no see so good. I don't see very well, so I wanted to work that in somehow to segment number 2. I figure there's no better place to talk about it than here at the interlude following segment number 3. I don't see so good. My eyesight's never really been good, and I'm getting older, and it's getting worse. I'm not that old, so the worseningness of my eyesight is outpacing the agingness of the rest of my person, and worrying, troublesome. Therefore, 77-inch TV. I'll tell you one thing, no matter how bad your vision gets, frame rate, man. It's all about frame rate, and I got 60 frames per second for a lot of the seconds of this game. And I just really did enjoy just the lavishness of some of the cutscenes or some of the dialogues, just sitting there, talking and relaxing with the characters. Kind of felt like hanging out. Though it makes me think now that I look back on this that I didn't really hang out that much in this game. It was just all business all the time. I was just businessing. Much like the pigs are doing outside in their squeal-o-mobile. Constant police car action here on this street. High action street. Just didn't luxuriate enough in the game. It took me 9 months to make this review. By and large, the vast majority of the time I spent with Cyberpunk 2077, I spent looking at a little window like this big in Adobe Premiere and watching some of the footage of the nice stuff that I liked. Just kind of luxuriating in that stuff. Kind of, it's made me a tiny bit sad. Made me think, did I hang out enough in this game? Anyway. That's story number 3. Please proceed to the next story you would like to watch. If this was your second one, it's an interesting combo. You're probably one of those people who like say your favorite season is winter or whatever. I considered all of these combinations. If you chose story 1 and 3, that's a good combo. 2 and 3, also a good combo. 3 and 4, really mastered that combo. I really, they were written as a cohesive thing, meant to kind of intermingle. 3 and 6, pretty good combo as well. Anyway, I'll leave the choice up to you. If it's time for you to watch the last part of the video, please watch it now. In either case, I'll see you again real soon. By which I mean, in a matter of seconds. Well, once again, thanks for watching. I mean it. If it weren't for you, yes, you, watching this video right now, it wouldn't be a video.